Embracers. Welcome to another episode of Embracing Autism IRL. Today, we're sitting down with Dr. Vladimir Barayev to discuss the importance of establishing good sleep habits and routines for autistic children. Dr. Vlad is a board certified pediatrician with extensive experience in developmental care, particularly focused on autism. Based in Staten Island, New York, Dr. Vlad operates on direct primary care DPC pediatric practice, providing personalized, holistic care to children with special needs. His approach emphasizes a supportive partnership with families, incorporating the 6 pillars of health, which include sleep, nutrition, physical activity, relationships, coping skills, and environmental management. Hi, Dr. Vlad. Welcome to the Embracing Autism podcast.
Hello, Leah. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about the work you do and its relationship with autism.
So, I am a general pediatrician and I specialize in autism. I use the 6 pillars of health, as you had so wonderfully mentioned and summarized, to help prevent uh, medical illness and complications for particularly children on the autism spectrum, because these 6 pillars, the reason they're even called pillars is because they hold up the rest of your health. So if you take good care of these foundational principles early on in life, then you're able to have a good, healthy life going forward.
And one of the things I know that you have focused on has been on the relationship of sleep with autistic individuals. I wanted to know, from your opinion, why do you feel that good sleep is particularly important when it comes to children with autism?
An excellent question. So, no single one of the 6 pillars is more important than the rest. They all work off of one another. They all work together because they can all weaken or strengthen one another. So, just to give you an example, sleep is one. There is an association between the amount of sleep you get and your ability to cope and manage with challenges that come with life, the stress of life. So, the more you are stressed, the more difficult it becomes to sleep. And the more difficulty you have sleeping, the more stress you feel. So, I can focus on any one of the 6. In particular, sleep is very important, of course. That's why it's one of the 6 foundational pillars of health. Um, if that one is missing, then all the other ones tend to fall down with it. So it will affect your stress. Well, people who don't sleep well don't move their bodies as much. They have less physical activities. They tend to have more cravings for unhealthy food. Does that ruins their nutrition? They tend to, not focus as much on trying to avoid environmental toxins when you're sleepy. So being in a noisy environment that can make you stressed out, or that can, or having poor quality air or water when you're tired, you're not going to suddenly look for the highest quality environmental exposures as possible. And your relationships with others. If you're very sleepy, you're going to be quite moody. So it's going to be difficult to form strong bonds and to be fully present for another person if you yourself have an empty cup.
I feel like you're describing me. So I have 2 autistic daughters. I was also diagnosed personally, in late adulthood, and sleep is definitely something that all of us have struggled with. My oldest daughter in particular really struggles with sleep. She's the type that will wake up, like, every 2 hours or so and need somebody to come and kind of re-tuck her in, get her back on that routine. So, it's interesting because a lot of the impacts that you're saying, I've actually witnessed myself or experienced it in our lives. So I'm actually interested to hear a little bit more about what these sleep challenges, as you described, how they differ from the challenges that neurotypical children would be experiencing, if at all.
Oh, absolutely. Children with autism definitely have higher frequency and higher intensity of sleep challenges compared to their neurotypical counterparts. We know that they have more likelihood throughout their lifetime, not only as infants, but throughout their lifetime, to have more difficulty with waking up in the middle of the night, more difficulty in falling asleep. And it kind of goes hand in hand with their other pillars of health, in that children with autism, unfortunately, they have more challenges with stress and anxiety. And they can have more challenges with how picky they are with their foods, maybe not always wanting to choose the most nutritious things to consume. and also with limitations even on physical activity. Like we know that children on spectrum can be very physically active, but it's not something that persists throughout their lifetime. So the type of physical activity that they may be doing may not always be beneficial to them. They're not necessarily moving their body in the most appropriate ways. Um, were they actually burning calories or getting themselves ready to fall into a restful state. So sleep just another one of those victims of being on the autism spectrum, that your life is also impacted by this. As I said before, all those pillars of health are interconnected, and it's amplified um, when you are someone on the autism spectrum.
I've noticed with our kids, they are kind of a little opposite when it comes to their sleep patterns. And honestly, their autism symptoms are a little bit on the opposite sides of things. But what we've noticed is like one of them is, like you mentioned, like really hyperactive. And so for her, it seems like bedtime, it's really hard for her to wind down. And she needs constant, almost like sensory input to really try to wind down. Whereas the other one, it seems like for her, it's more of a mental winding down. So one of them seems to be more physically active and the other one's more mentally active. And so both of them have issues with falling asleep. So I was wondering from your experience, what are some effective strategies for helping kids like ours or other autistic children in establishing good sleep habits?
I love the way you phrase that question, because the key word there comes down to the word habits. When we think of habits, the way that I approach it with families, I tell them over between 60 to 90% of every single activity that a neurotypical person or a child on the spectrum would do throughout their day is on autopilot. We don't really think about the actions that we're partaking in because we've done them so often and we're so comfortable with them. And it's at a heightened level, once again, for children on the autism spectrum. They really thrive and love routine. It's comforting to them to do something that they're used to doing. Unfortunately, sometimes those routines can be self-defeating. They can be routines that make sleep more challenging for them. One of the victims of modern living is that we have lights on all around us all the time, so it kind of impairs our body's natural ability to respond to the lack of light when the sun is supposed to be naturally setting, so that our brain still wants to be awake and active, even though it's time for us to get a decent regenerative amount of sleep. And we have to, just as we can develop bad habits over time that make sleep more difficult, we can also train ourselves to instill good habits. And the technique that I find most effective to instill good habits into your health, I use habits for all pillars of health. When it comes to sleep in particular, it's all about implementing tiny things relative to what we know affects our sleep quality, and then building upon them. Because before you can have an excellent routine, you need to have a routine at all. You have to be doing something consistently before you can start tweaking it and making it an optimal routine. So the I will give you some details and examples. The way that we begin is we start out with making sure, do we even have a routine, or are we just, however it is, if you're late on the couch, you're gonna fall asleep, and we're gonna put you in bed until the next morning. Or if you usually have a routine where you get bathed, you have a wind down period, you read a story, you may have a sensory brush that you may brush your child, you may put lotion on your child's skin, you may lay them down, you may sing them a song, you may cuddle with them together. Um, like the question is there a routine at all? And surprisingly, there may be a routine. It may not be done consistently. That's the first question. The first thing you want to set up is knowing that at this particular time we begin our wind down and evening routine, and we keep it consistent from one night to the next, and we don't vary it very much from weekdays and weekends, because I know people's schedules change between weekdays and weekends. So the maximum distance between when your usual bedtime routine should begin should be no longer than an hour difference between weekdays and weekends. That way, the body can adjust and prepare to go into sleep mode and to be comfortable with it. And you also have to start your routines very, very small with things that may seem like they shouldn't really have that much of effect on your sleep. For example, a simple thing would be to begin with having an alarm, just an alarm that goes off at a particular time of the night, and that means okay, we're all getting ready, and we're turning off the TV. We are putting our electronics out of the bedroom. We are trying to minimize lights in the home. We have prepared for the next day, and now we're all going to head up and begin our bedtime routine. So just having a set time could be the first step, and making sure that we have good sleep hygiene. Once we have a good hour of bedtime established, then we have good sleep hygiene, meaning that we don't want to have a room that's not going to be conductive to staying asleep the whole night. Cool, dark environment, not overly hot, not a room where everyone's sweating, without artificial lights, because that very, very evil blue light that gets into our eyeballs and reduces the amount of melatonin that our brain naturally produces will keep us actively mentally awake. So at least an hour before bedtime, those screens, the lights have to be turned off and put away, and we have to put our brain into, okay, we're going to do a cool down mode. And doing this consistently from one night to the next, building on just little tiny things, just seeing if our family can actually stick with the plan of when that alarm goes off, everyone knows, okay, we're shutting it down, we're heading up for the night. Even if we're not going to fall asleep, that's okay. In the beginning, you're not, just because you set an alarm doesn't mean you're automatically going to have great sleep hygiene. But it's that first step. If you can master that first concept of we have a time, then the other things begin to fall in place and we could build upon it.
And for our listeners out there, if your kid is anything like ours and is terrified of alarms, we use a visual timer. So we use like I think it's called an Echo Light from Amazon, and you can actually color code lights, and that is like a visual representation of a timer. So that works great for us. But I did have a question to follow up on that. So what would you say for autistic kids who are afraid of the dark? So, like our youngest, for example, she insists on having a light in her room and she doesn't want a dim light. She wants a bright light and she will only sleep if we put that bright light in her room.
So they have lights, so night lights for children, and you want to make sure that those night lights that you have, they have ones that are made with red light filters, because red light doesn't suppress your release of melatonin, and that will still help your child to fall asleep.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that was even a thing. Good tip.
Yes. Yes, yeah. And the it's not all light that's going to be as harmful to sleep. Every child is very unique, and it may not be just the lights in the room that would activate their brain. I know there are different types of, even within the neurotypical world, there are different types of people who the amount of light that's in their room at night when they're sleeping may either hinder or activate their sleep. So you have to really know your child also, because there's no one size fits all approach to anything, no matter what doctors tell you. It doesn't exist. This is the reason why my practice is a direct care practice where I have very tailored and individualized plans with my families. I don't tell them things that their kids would not respond to, because that defeats the purpose. Like I wouldn't tell you you have to make your house completely pitch black because your children are afraid of the dark. That doesn't help you.
Yeah, so trial and error is basically what I'm hearing.
That's a part of it, yes. There's tried and true techniques. There are things that we definitely want to do. Bedtime also doesn't begin at night. Bedtime also begins throughout the day beforehand. The amount of caffeine that children consume with their beverages, even the amount of hidden caffeines and like sports drinks and things like that, and how much they've moved their body throughout the day, so the amount of physical activity that they've had throughout the day, and how much their minds are perseverating over the challenges and stresses of the day will impact their sleep without a doubt. So one of my six pillars of health, of managing and coping with stress, um, developing a mindfulness routine for our kids, whether that be stretching and yoga or box breathing or meditation, or whatever games may help them take their minds off of what they're focusing on and onto a calm state. Just even putting their hand on their chest and feeling their heart beating, that's a form of mindfulness, because that you are getting the feedback from your body that the present moment your heart is beating. So don't have your mind thinking about like what happened in school earlier today, or that you forgot to wear your favorite shirt or whatever have you.
Yeah, our oldest has a lot of anxiety, and I can attest to that. It does really work when we do that. So, definitely great
Mhm.
advice. Um, our youngest is the one who's hyperactive. So, I was wondering from your perspective or your opinion, is it worse or better to kind of get that energy out through activity prior to bedtime, or is that specific to the child? For example, because she's very highly sensory seeking, one of the things that we've tried at night is she has her little mini trampoline, and we'll say something like, "Okay, do like 20 jumps and then we'll get her ready to bed." Does that depend on, I guess, the type where they fall on the spectrum, or do you feel like that's something that would make sleep better or worse?
It would depend on your child, honestly, because I know there are some kids that if they go on do their 20 jumps, it gets that itch of needing to jump out of them, so they can, okay, now go and lay down and rest peacefully. And then there are other kids, if they were to jump on the trampoline, they'd be too wired and too excited and not be able to fall asleep. So once again, it's kind of a trial and error type of thing. And I don't pretend that I know their kids better than parents do, because even the things like you're gonna laugh at me for contradicting myself. Even things like blue light, it doesn't have a negative effect on everyone. It actually affects people differently. Because I'll give you a story. I have a family member who is literally without the TV on in their bedroom, as an adult, they're not able to fall asleep without it. And I've heard this story many times, and it's true. Like if you need that kind of stimulation to help you fall asleep, that's your biology. That's what you need. I'm not here to dispute your biology. If you know that actually is a beneficial factor for you, by all means, go ahead. But the goal is to get an adequate number of hours of sleep. Depending on the age of the child, it can be anywhere from 8 to 9 to 10 hours at night that they'll need to sleep consistently. And the hours that are most critical for sleep are the hours before midnight. So if you
Mm.
sleep from 12 to 8 a.m., you'll be less well rested than if you slept from 10 a.m. to 6. I mean, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. If
Sounds
you
like I'm
shifted it
doing
back
this
by 2.
Sounds like I'm doing this all wrong for myself. It's funny that you mentioned that though, because I'm that person who has to sleep with the TV on, and then I just wear an eye mask so I don't get the light, but I need the sound from the television or I can't sleep.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. Like if people find that they need the sound, there are many podcasts that would love to give you some noise into your ears on your way to sleep. That is definitely another thing. If now you mentioned a key word, sensory seeking children on the spectrum. We have sensory brushes, we have fidget toys, we have sensory weighted blankets for older children. Definitely don't want to use them in babies, but older children, that help them feel more comfortable, and are able to help them to be able to fall asleep. Whatever it takes for their sensory needs to be met before bed, you have my blessing by all means. They Because that sleep quality will affect how they behave throughout the day going forward. The amount of tantrums that they may have going forward in the day, how easily they snap at people, how they eat throughout the day will change based on how much they slept. Everything is affected by that going forward. So, in addition to sensory needs that children may have, when it research has proven that when it comes to using melatonin, well, that's a very popular supplement that a lot of parents give their children. The problem with melatonin is that the kind that we get over the counter, um, the Food and Drug Administration does not typically oversee the quality. So they have actually published research studies showing that some products may claim to have, like, for example, 2 milligrams in a melatonin gummy, for example. In reality, had 4 or 6 or more milligrams in there when they tested it. Other products um, had cannabis products within the melatonin gummies as well that was not labeled. So the quality of these products is not assured per se. So what I do tell families is to make sure that it is anything that they buy that contains melatonin for their child should be checked and approved by an independent lab, something like Consumer Labs or the U.S. Pharmacopoeia. So it'll have a seal, a certificate of quality on it, saying USP certified or CL certified, and that will let you know that if it says that it's a 2 milligram product, it's actually 2 milligrams in there. You're not overdosing or underdosing your child, because these are not benign things that you're giving to your child. That is, melatonin is a hormone that travels and activates things in our blood. However, it is proven that melatonin does help children on the autism spectrum with challenges with sleep.
I have a question on melatonin. I'm not sure if you have an answer, but one of the things that I have heard is that if your child is taking melatonin, and I guess you're taking it maybe for a long period of time, like over weeks or months, that it can actually hinder your body's natural ability to produce melatonin because it kind of becomes a little bit like dependent on getting it artificially. Do you know if there's any validity to that?
That is a good question. I don't think it has. There are no studies that have definitively proven that to be the case that I'm aware of. We don't really know what the long-term consequences of children needing to use melatonin over the long term are. In the short term, it is safe and effective to use. It has been shown to be safe and effective to use for children. And before needing to go to the melatonin route, though, that's kind of like we leave that as a last line of defense when we've tried other things. You don't want to jump straight to melatonin until you have um, mastered and worked out your sleep routines and held yourself accountable to, like, no, I'm not only saying that I have a good sleep routine, I'm actually following through. Like, I have an accountability buddy, that another family that I text with, like, yay, we're going to bed now, see, I told you we're going to go to bed at this time. They text you back, all right, we're going to bed too, something like that, for example. Like, just to keep yourself accountable to doing things consistently, because things that are very easy to do consistently are also easy to not do consistently. So if it's something that sounds very simple to do, it's because it is simple to do. It's just hard to be consistent with it every night as our schedules change and the priorities change and new things and new changes come into our life and our routines change during the day. So our sleep habits may change as well. New stressors come in, jobs change, families grow, families shrink, family news, all kinds of things that impact our sleep. But sleep, unfortunately, gets forgotten about. We tend to sacrifice sleep before we sacrifice anything else in our schedule, and that's to our own detriment, because sleep is very critical for our optimal functioning. Like, when we they've actually proven that whenever someone, like, goes to work or drives a car, that when they haven't gotten enough sleep, it's the equivalent to them being drunk behind the wheel of a car. That's the level of impairment that they may experience. So it affects your performance in so many fields.
That certainly explains my kids' behavior when they're sleep deprived.
Totally, totally.
So, what advice would you give to parents who might be trying whatever they can to get their kids to settle down, but their kid has really become resistant to the bedtime routine and they are having a lot of these like nighttime awakenings?
So that all comes back to how much trauma and stress there is around bedtime. I Going back to my 6 pillars, one of the 6 pillars of health is, this is a common theme. I always go back to my 6 pillars. They explain issues that will come up with other pillars. So going back to the pillar of relationships, when parents and kids have a strong relationship with one another, when there's not a power struggle to try to get them to do certain things, um, the sleep routines tend to work themselves out as well. But if sleep becomes a stressful time for both the parents and the child, then it's important to just take a step back and say, well, what is the reason that I'm trying to get my child sleep? So they will get good sleep so that they can function well during the day, and so that I can get good sleep and I can be a better parent for them tomorrow as well. Having grace for yourself for trying to improve your child's health by sleep, and not making it a battle where you're fighting with them and arguing and trying to push your will onto what they want, trying to get them involved into the importance of sleep, and explain to them what we're trying to accomplish, and making it something that's enjoyable for them, making it something that's a pleasure. Like, so, making the bedtime routine something that they look forward to, because right before we go into bed, there's some really fun activity that we get to do. We get to play with Play-Doh, or we color right before, or we get to make up our own stories, and then when we get into bed, we tell them. Or we can take our night lights and we could go under the covers and tell each other stories before we go to bed as well. So something that, figure out what works for your family, what motivates your child, because particularly, especially when it comes to children on the autism spectrum, motivation is key for the things that we try to help our children with. When they're not motivated, it's a massive struggle to get them to do anything at all, and it's understandable. Um, uh, but making sure we know what their motivators are, and using it for them effectively will help make that less of a struggle. And understanding that it may take longer. So, establishing good sleep habits and sleep routines begins with the parents. So we role model behaviors for our kids. So we first establish good routines and habits for ourselves. They feed off of that. We develop a relationship with them, showing them, look, I am also taking responsibility for my own sleep to make sure that I get good rest, so that you can follow along with me. And by being that role model for them, it helps them feel like they are, you know, as involved as can be in that whole parent-child dynamic.
Yeah, it's kind of giving them a little bit of control so they don't have as much anxiety about it. I get that because my oldest definitely likes to have the control. So
Absolutely.
we mentioned a lot of non-medical interventions that you can do, so, like, the sensory stuff, sleep routines, all of that stuff. Is there a point in time where a parent should consider some sort of medical intervention? And if so, what would that look like?
Yes, absolutely. We want to make sure that there aren't medical, because there are some cases where there are medical issues that are causing a child to have difficulty sleeping. Um, Fortunately, like over 90% of the time, there are no medical underlying issues that are happening. And once we establish a routine, and we make sure we go through good sleep hygiene prior to going to bed and in bed, uh, if we've done all of that, we've taken away all those factors, and we still are having issues, at that point, it would be the right time to speak with your child's pediatrician, and to review a more detailed sleep history, because there are other conditions. One condition, for example, I can give you is, there are some children who snore at night, and their snoring is a symptom of a much bigger issue, where they have sleep apnea, where their brain is literally being deprived of oxygen in the middle of the night, and waking up from being deprived of oxygen in the middle of the night is their way of like not suffocating in their sleep. So that wakes them, then they're not able to have quality restful sleep. So getting an evaluation for something like that, if you're having a child, for example, who snores a lot, would be a great idea. And then there's other evaluations that may be necessary with a sleep specialist, so they can do a sleep study to see exactly how deep and how restful a child's sleep is. And there are maybe other medications and therapies which we have available, which may be indicated for those kids. So, big picture, most of the time, the solution is um, a non medical intervention, where we just establish good routines. We focus on our six pillars of health. We have good relationships with our families because they role model for us what good sleep is. We are appropriately physically active during the day. We avoid those environmental exposures of excess caffeine in our diet. We don't drink too much water before bed. That way we don't have to wake up and go pee in the middle of the night and ruining our sleep. And we avoid things that may give us heartburn, for example, any foods that we know that can trigger heartburn in ourselves or our kids. Try not to eat too late at night. We remove the blue screens from interfering with sleep if those are triggers for kids, which most kids, those are triggers for them staying awake and staying stimulated. And we have a good habits around helping our children be mindful at bedtime and be calm and use sensory. If we've done all of that, that will eliminate 90% of the challenges that come with sleep. And then if we continue to have challenges, then that's when we explore further. And we never stop exploring until we get to a high quality sleep state, because sleep affects everything, and we can't ignore a child who is really struggling to sleep consistently from one night to the next, because it affects their quality of life at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So I wanted to ask you if you have any personal words of wisdom or final words of advice or encouragement for parents who are struggling with this. I know that, it's kind of a domino effect because if your kid is sleep deprived, more than likely the parent is going to be sleep deprived as well. So, what would you say to those parents who are trying to work towards improving their autistic child's sleep habits?
Stay strong. You are not alone in this. It is an extremely a common challenge. One of the top challenges that parents of autistic children face is their sleep. Make sure that you know that you have a community of support, your own personal circle, your friends and family. If there is of the possibility that someone could help you out during a bedtime that's not currently living with you, if you have a mother-in-law, a grandparent, someone to help you guys out, do not be afraid to ask for help. Do not suffer in silence, because in order for you to help your child achieve their potential, you have to fill into their cup from a full cup of your own. And if you're sleep deprived, you're not filling your child's potential with a full cup of your own first. So just like how when the oxygen masks fall down in the airplane, they say first secure your oxygen mask before you help out anyone around you. The same thing comes with sleep and being sleep deprived. So you want to first make sure that you are taking good care of yourself, that you know that you're in a supportive community, and that everyone, many families struggle with this, and you are not alone in this, and it will get better because you will take the appropriate steps necessary to help your child succeed.
Excellent. This is also one of the last questions that I ask a lot of our guests. We ask this because our podcast, as you know, is called Embracing Autism. And I'm always curious to know what our guests perceive as what embracing autism means to them. So, that phrase, what does it mean to you to embrace autism?
That is a beautiful question. To me, what it means to embrace autism is I've actually been asked this question before, and there was a misunderstanding. So, in my eyes, to embrace autism means to accept both the challenges that can come with having a child on the autism spectrum, or even yourself being on the autism spectrum, as well as the unique gifts that having the lens of an autistic perspective on the world would contribute to the world. So, at the same time as we embrace the difficulties, we also have to embrace all of the wonderful gifts, the attention to detail, the ability to focus for long periods of time on a sustained task that other people may find boring, the ability to have that almost extrasensory perception of like having perfect pitch. All of this is all part of autism. So embracing it means accepting both that this is part of a person's identity, that they see the world from a different lens. Sometimes that different lens makes it more difficult to participate in a world that was really designed for and by neurotypical individuals. Um, it does not mean, however, taking whatever challenges come with autism and just living with them without ever trying to improve or optimize a person's potential. That is not embracing autism. That is more like giving up on autism.
That's a really good balanced approach. So, before we wrap up here, are there any resources that you can share with my audience?
Absolutely. I have a wonderful YouTube channel for your audience with currently over 71 videos explaining different questions on autism from diagnostic processes to management to the future of stem cell therapies and AAC devices and the different types of ABA approaches that we have um, come up with over the years beyond just discrete trial training. So, all of that is available on my YouTube channel. Autism Demystified is what the title of the series is called.
Okay, and do you have the handle for that?
Yes, so that would be at Barayev Peds is both on Facebook and on YouTube.
Perfect. And is there a website that they can find you at?
Yes, so my clinic website is www.thebdpc.com. We'll have links to all my social media as well as the YouTube channel and more information for any families in New York State who would love to work with me. I'm currently accepting new patients, and they could learn more about my practice at the website.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a really interesting conversation and one that I will personally put to good use, I am sure. It was a pleasure having you.
I'm very happy to help, and if there's one thing I really want to be is to be useful. There is no point of giving information if it's not going to be useful.
Well, I am sure our listeners will definitely use it. This is a very common problem, and they usually ask for info on this. So I'm sure you'll get a lot of listens. Thank you so
Great,
much.
great. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.